Listen up, folks. When you have spent as much time burning powder on the firing line as I have, you start to notice a clear divide in the wheel gun world. You have your barbecue guns, the pretty safe queens you show off to your buddies, and then you have the doomsday tools. Ruger does not just manufacture handguns. They forge absolute battlefield tanks that just happen to fit inside an outside-the-waistband holster. And the GP100? That hunk of steel is the undisputed heavyweight champion of that rugged philosophy. But do not let that massive, overbuilt frame trick you into thinking it is just a primitive club. There is a ton of brilliant, battle-tested engineering baked into this platform. Most guys browsing the gun counter have no idea that this working-class American hero actually shares its genetic code with a European police service pistol. Or that the boys over at Smith & Wesson were so threatened by its sheer mass that they ran a literal magazine ad comparing this revolver to a greasy, oversized hamburger patty. Oh yeah, we are diving deep into that rivalry today. We are putting the GP100 on the operating table to see what makes it tick. We are going to break down exactly why this beast can chew through thousands of full-power .357 Magnum loads without a hiccup. We will talk about that legendary triple-locking cylinder. We will discuss the solid frame architecture. And we will explain why this heavy metal classic still holds its own in a modern defensive landscape completely overrun by polymer-framed Wonder Nines. So, if you appreciate heavy recoil and raw American steel, grab your ear pro, lock that slide back, and stay tuned. Section 1. The Security 6 Legacy. To fully grasp the pedigree of the GP100, we need to take a quick trip back in time. We have to look at the godfather of Ruger's modern double-action lineup. Back in 1972, Ruger shocked the market when they unveiled the Security 6. This was a direct, unapologetic shot across the bow at the established giants of the industry. At the time, law enforcement holsters were dominated by the Smith & Wesson Model 19, the Model 66, and the outrageously expensive Colt Python. The Security 6 was Ruger stepping up to the plate and declaring that they could build a tougher gun for less money. Instead of relying on a delicate side plate held together by tiny screws, Ruger utilized a solid one-piece cast frame. That structural integrity made it incredibly popular with hard-use agencies like the U.S. Border Patrol. Ruger even pushed the envelope early on, offering it chambered in 9mm. That was a bold move back in an era where the average beat cop was completely married to the .38 Special. But let us be completely honest about the reality of the firing line. The Security 6 was a phenomenal workhorse, but it absolutely had its physical limits. It was rated for the .357 Magnum, sure, but if you fed it a steady, punishing diet of high-velocity, flame-throwing Magnum cartridges, the gun would eventually start to shoot loose. Ruger's engineering team knew exactly what they had to do. To truly dethrone Smith & Wesson, they could not just build a strong revolver, they had to build an invincible one. Section 2. Enter the GP100. Fast forward your calendars to the early 80s. The engineering objective at Ruger was crystal clear. Design a duty-sized revolver that could digest an infinite amount of maximum pressure .357 Magnum ammunition without ever suffering from timing issues or frame stretch. In 1985, the GP100 finally made its grand entrance into the market, and man, did they beef up the dimensions. The side walls of the frame were significantly thickened. The top strap was reinforced with extra steel to handle extreme chamber pressures, and they integrated a massive, full-length underlug right beneath the barrel. Let me tell you from experience, that underlug is not just there to look intimidating. That extra muzzle weight acts like an anchor, completely taming the aggressive muzzle flip when you are dumping high-grain defensive loads downrange. Shooters who transitioned from the old Security 6 to this new platform felt the difference the second they gripped it. It felt incredibly substantial, like a piece of industrial machinery in your hands. Ruger also carried over their genius transfer bar safety mechanism. For modern concealed carry or duty use, this is an absolute non-negotiable feature. You can confidently carry this wheel gun with a fully loaded 6-round cylinder. If you drop it hammer first onto concrete, it physically cannot fire unless the trigger is completely depressed to the rear. When you combine that drop-safe design with heavy-duty coil springs and a completely modular trigger group, the GP100 was not just a product update. It was a sheer flex of manufacturing dominance. Section 3. The French Connection. Now, let me give you a golden nugget of firearms trivia that you can use to win your next bet at the local gun counter. The rugged, all-American GP100 actually has a sophisticated European cousin. Back in the late 70s, French police forces were desperately hunting for a brand new service sidearm. They absolutely loved the Magnum MR-73. But let's be real, that specific revolver is hand-fitted like a high-end Swiss watch, and it costs an absolute fortune to produce. The French government needed something they could mass-produce on a strict budget. So, they reached across the Atlantic and partnered up with Ruger. The love child of that partnership was the Magnum Special Police, which later evolved into the MR-88. It was an incredible hybrid system. You had rugged, American-made Ruger frames and internal guts, paired flawlessly with precision-machined French barrels and cylinders. While the French were busy modifying that Security 6 lineage for their street cops, Ruger took those engineering lessons and ran in the opposite direction for the U.S. consumer market. They decided to scale everything up. They refined their proprietary investment casting process. This allowed them to pour a massive, continuous chunk of solid steel that did not require hundreds of hours of expensive manual machining. So, while the French MR-88 and our beloved GP100 share the same family tree, the GP100 is the brother that spent 5 years powerlifting in the gym and crushing protein shakes. Section 4. The Triple Locking Cylinder. Let us get under the hood and talk about the mechanical guts. You will constantly hear the marketing term triple locking cylinder tossed around in forums. But on the GP100 platform, that lockup is the absolute secret sauce to its legendary durability. Most traditional revolvers on the market only lock up at the rear of the cylinder, and maybe up at the tip of the ejector rod. Ruger engineers looked at that standard and decided it was completely unacceptable for the chamber pressures they wanted to achieve. Instead, they engineered a system that locks the cylinder directly into the frame at 3 distinct points. It locks at the front of the crane, the rear of the cylinder, and right at the bottom. This robust, triangulated lockup keeps the cylinder chambers perfectly concentric with the forcing cone, trigger pull after trigger pull. Now, a quick pro tip for you newer shooters. If you pick up a brand new GP100 and wiggle the cylinder, you are going to feel a tiny bit of rotational play. Do not run to the forums and freak out. That is a 100% intentional design feature. Ruger engineered a very specific amount of microfloat into the lockup. This allows the projectile to perfectly center itself as it jumps the gap and enters the barrel rifling. It is a brilliant self-correcting mechanical system that drastically boosts long-term reliability. Think about the classic Colt revolvers with their tight, bank vault lockups that require a master gunsmith to hand-fit every surface. The Ruger system is totally different. It is engineered to keep running flawlessly, even when the gun gets completely caked in carbon buildup and blistering hot from rapid fire. That is the exact reason you can feed it thousands of rounds of spicy plus P ammunition without ever throwing the timing out of whack. Section 5. The Burger War and Frame Strength. If you want to know the biggest structural difference between a Ruger and a Smith & Wesson, you have to look at the frame architecture. Smith & Wesson relies on a traditional side plate design. They mill a large opening into the side of the receiver, drop all the delicate internal components inside, and then cap it off with a flat metal plate held by screws. Ruger looked at that design and said, absolutely not. The GP100 utilizes a solid, continuous loop of ordnance-grade steel. Because there is no side plate cut into the frame, there are 0 structural weak points where the metal could flex or warp under massive internal pressure. Ruger was incredibly proud of this design, and they bragged about it endlessly in their vintage gun magazine advertisements. Smith & Wesson actually got so offended that they clapped back with a retaliatory ad campaign. They printed a picture of a thick, greasy hamburger patty, basically calling the Ruger frame fat, bloated, and entirely too bulky. Smith claimed their traditional forged frames were plenty strong without lugging around all that extra dead weight. And look, I will give credit where it is due. A Smith Model 686 is a remarkably sleek, elegant machine. But the Ruger design holds a massive, undeniable advantage when it comes to field maintenance. With the GP100, You can drop the entire trigger guard and fire control group out the bottom of the frame as one unified piece. You do not need a set of hollow ground screwdrivers and a prayer to get in there and clean out the grit. It is completely modular, incredibly simple to service, and tough as coffin nails. Section 6. The Grip Peg Advantage. Let us talk about another stroke of absolute engineering genius, the grip peg. Look at almost any traditional revolver, and you will see a full-size metal grip frame dictating the exact shape and angle of your hand placement. If you have tiny hands, or if you have massive meat-hook paws like me, you are entirely limited by the dimensions of that solid steel backstrap. Ruger threw that concept in the trash. They completely eliminated the traditional grip frame and replaced it with a simple, robust metal peg extending downward from the receiver. This drastically changes the game because it means the grip material itself completely dictates the ergonomics, not the structural metal. You can easily swap on a minimalist, compact rubber grip if you are carrying concealed under a jacket. Or you can bolt on a massive, contoured wooden target stock if you are shooting bullseye matches at the range. Because there is no exposed metal backstrap slamming into the web of your hand, you get significantly better recoil absorption. There is a thick layer of shock-absorbing material between your bones and the detonating cartridge. Plus, eliminating that traditional grip frame allowed Ruger to leave far more solid steel in the critical areas of the receiver. It is just one more perfect example of pure, unapologetic function over form. Section 7. Not just a Magnum. While the 357 Magnum is undeniably the bread and butter of this platform, the GP100 is far more than a one-trick pony. This gun is an incredibly versatile chameleon, and Ruger has chambered it in just about every caliber you can imagine over the years. You can track down models chambered in the 327 Federal Magnum. If you know anything about ballistics, you know that is a serious sleeper caliber that gives you 7 rounds of capacity instead of the standard 6. They also manufacture a dedicated 5-shot version chambered in .44 Special for the big-bore traditionalists out there. They even offer a heavy-barreled 10-shot 22 long rifle variant. Let me tell you, running rimfire through a frame this heavy is zero recoil heaven, making it arguably the ultimate fundamental training tool. But here is where it gets really interesting for the tactical crowd. They make a dedicated model chambered in 10mm auto. It utilizes stamped steel moon clips to reliably extract those rimless semi-auto cartridges. If you are already stockpiling 10mm ammunition for your Glock 20 or your custom 1911, this Ruger makes the absolute perfect companion piece. The sheer brute strength of the GP100 action handles the violent, snappy recoil impulse of full-power 10mm without breaking a single sweat. Section 8. The Verdict on Aesthetics. All right, let us be entirely real with each other about the aesthetics of this firearm. The visual profile of the GP100 is highly polarizing in the gun community. It is blocky, it is chunky, it sports that massive, uncompromising underlug and a top strap thick enough to stop a truck. It absolutely does not possess the graceful, sweeping curves of a vintage Colt Python or the classic balanced profile of a Smith K-frame. Some guys at the range will take one look at it and tell you it looks like a crude cinder block with a trigger attached to it. But other shooters, and I proudly include myself in this camp, look at this revolver and see a dedicated, life-saving tool that means absolute business. Ruger intentionally retained a lot of those rugged service revolver vibes from the 1970s, and those iconic factory rubber grips featuring the inlaid wood panels. Those are a definitive love it or hate it design choice that screams retro tactical. But here is the absolute bottom line, folks. Ruger did not design this revolver to sit behind a pane of glass in a velvet-lined display case. They built this machine to go to work. It was engineered to ride in a duty holster, banging against door frames, surviving the pouring rain, and getting dropped in the mud. It was specifically designed to go bang and protect your life when the chips are down and the stakes are highest. And when you are fighting for your life, pretty does not mean a damn thing. Performance is the only metric that matters.
If you guys enjoyed this deep dive into a piece of heavy American steel, do me a favor, smash that like button. Hit subscribe so you do not miss any of our upcoming honest firearms reviews. And jump down into the comments section right now. I want to know where you stand. Are you rolling with Team Ruger for that indestructible durability? Or are you backing Team Smith & Wesson for that classic trigger pull? Let me hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay safe, keep your powder dry, and keep on shooting.